Burgess and Bolton's weekly wrap-up.
Hello, Ben.
Hello, Jeremy. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Yes. Can we still say that? We can still say it.
Till the end of January, you can say it.
Oh, right. Okay.
It's an official rule now.
You know what the rules are. That's good. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first edition of 2025's Burgess and Bolton's weekly wrap-up, where we look at everything to do with the London market, technology change, innovation, and this week we are going to kind of, I guess, look at the news as always, but we're going to also look forward to 2025. We got some new things in store that we're going to tell you about, and we shall have a conversation as always. If anybody's live on the LinkedIn feed, do get involved in the comments. We can see that, so we can make it as interactive as possible for 2025. Right. No bell today, Ben, but I've got this. So, the news horn.
Horn of news.
The horn of news. So, big news. Big. John Neal to leave Lloyd's in 2025. I don't think there's a date yet, unless I've missed that.
It's later in 25, which is interesting. So, don't know what that means.
No, leaves it. So it starts to pose a few questions, doesn't it? Firstly, and we can talk about that. Firstly, about perhaps the reasons why he's leaving. We can talk about the new chairperson coming in. Also, kind of question some of the initiatives that are going on at Lloyd's. Probably most important in my world is the Blueprint 2 stuff around digitizing the London market. But yeah, Ben, what do you take on it?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I have spoken to quite a few people this week, funnily enough, because I've been out and about in the market for various reasons at various events. And I think it's a very interesting. I mean, people are very interested why. I mean, I think a few people were surprised. I think we talked before about expecting John Neal to retire. He's done that. He's done a certain amount of time in the job. There is a new chair coming in that often might predicate a change of CEO as well. So there's all of those, if you might call them sort of natural factors. I don't think anybody was expecting him to go to become head of reinsurance at Aon. That's a interesting move, because typically, of course, chief execs from Lloyd's will go and join the sort of great and the good. They'll go and work for United Nations, or they'll do kind of good big things. Now, to be fair, part of his remit at Aon is climate, and potentially, of course, that is a very big area for Aon to get into, certainly to make them more distinctive versus their competition. That's perhaps where a lot of the opportunity lies as well in insurance in the future, with evolving risks. Also, of course, Neal has got a lot of inside knowledge about the markets and capital, and I guess is a sort of person who's sitting in a room with alternative capital investors, not just insurance capital, would have a lot of sway and a lot of credibility because of his role at Lloyd. So I think for Aon, it sounds like a good move. He's a big name to recruit. Would he have stayed? I think that. So I put the press release up here because I think the press releases often tell you a lot about what's not said more than what is said. So what is said reasonably is that he has presided over a very successful financial period at Lloyd's. Arguably, that is the franchisees effectively do it, but Lloyd's has a role in that, of course, in terms of directing it. And they did Decile 10 under his remit, and they did all sorts of different things that have encouraged a more profitable perhaps more orderly market. I think he has done half decent work on some of the culture stuff, which is also mentioned here, but very much 1/3 of a sentence here is the technology side of it, which I think is really probably not the thing they want to see as part of the legacy for John Neal.
No. And I think you can look back to the changes that took place to the Blueprint 2 kind of project, if you want to call it that, in summer, with a kind of reset. It was like a labor reset. This isn't a reset or a relaunch. It's a whatever.
Yeah. New milestones. Yeah. You know something's failing when you keep doing new milestones.
Yeah. So yes, I agree with all of that. I think in terms of, I guess the question that's been coming up in the few of the conversations I've been having is whether a new CEO has a new broom and kind of then sweeps some of this stuff away. I think that'd be interesting to find out. I think when I was taking the temperature on that question, people were saying that actually the systems that we've got at the moment pose a systemic risk. That they are too flimsy now. We have to change at least that initial phase one, moving what we're doing now into kind of the digital world, because it's not fit for purpose. Now, what happens when the phase two comes along? Who knows? I think people are still aiming and are still hoping that it will be followed through on, because actually that's when the real business benefits will be played out. But it's interesting. We've often talked about the market dynamics, and actually will competition just play its role, and you don't need to push from the center if you have the fundamentals in place of a digital marketplace. Is that actually all you need to do? The competition will take care of itself, because innovations will take place. The foundational level of the hygiene factor of technology will raise up, and then that is that's where everyone will jump off from.
I agree. I think these press releases are always very carefully poured over and written at these points, so you can read a lot between the lines. I think this does say that Neal set the platform. Clearly, it's not going to say delivered, but he did set the platform for digital, operational, and cultural change for the long term. Now, that's a very carefully phrased sentence, which basically says, if you want to take it this way, we've got some of the way on, putting out the fundamentals, but it's going to take a long time to change. You could also argue, if you wanted to really stretch it to your point, that actually this may presage the new broom saying there will be a different role for Lloyd's in technology going forward. In other words, we won't be the owners of it. We will be the facilitators of the competition, if you like. Let them work it out themselves. And Roxburgh's coming in from everybody says he's the real deal. He's been in business. He knows banking. He knows that. He will have seen this. He will have. I think he would raise an eyebrow at a market where the organization, the entity that was the franchise operator, was trying to own the whole shebang. He would probably say, look, leave it up to the technology companies to take the risk and compete to be successful and make money out of it.
Yep. Good. Okay. First bit of news of the year.
Yeah, but the timing's important, isn't it, though? Because if he's around for another whole year, then that means what? That there's a sort of no man's land of nothing happening between him and the new CEO. The thing we can do in another show is the runners and riders. I mean, people have already put in some of the names, and I won't mention them now, but that's kind of interesting too. You kind of feel like this ought to be a quick turnover, because we know the score, right? He's going to Aon, fine. How can he how can he sit in Lloyd's when isn't there a conflict sitting in Lloyd's and then potentially going into a broking house? You know, what do people in Marsh think of that, for example? I think people would be uncomfortable with John staying around for too long in role if he's sitting there thinking, well, I can still pull all the strings in Lloyd's and then I'll go to Aon. Marsh, I'm sure, and other broking houses will be saying this needs to be done quickly, and you can't, or he goes on gardening leave, basically.
Yeah. So we'll watch that, and as you say, Ben, we'll probably do a follow-up on the runners and riders, as you put it. That's a good phrase.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I know quite a few of them, so I've got to be, as you do, a bit careful. I'm going to be very objective about that.
Yeah, of course we will. As always. Right, where's the horn? There it is. So let's move on. What do you want to talk about next, Ben? There's so much to talk about. You want to talk about wildfires?
Yeah.
I don't know if I've actually got a clip, but we all know what we're talking about here, the fires in LA and kind of I don't know what it's up to now, 20,000 buildings that have been all
terrible.
Yeah. And I was going to ask you really kind of, it's obviously big news in the news cycle on the telly and everything, but is it big news for the London market? Is it impacting the London market?
Not as much. I mean, I think the general the articles I've read so far are saying that actually reinsurance will be largely unscathed by this because so much had been pulled from commercial insurers, and you know, for lots of reasons, not insurers' fault, just putting out, but lots of bad reasons for how insurance is managed state-wise in those areas. So I think the impact of this cat on the market will not be, on the reinsurance end of things, will not be as big as it perhaps could have been if this hadn't been pulled. I mean, this is a good article if anybody can get hold of it in the New Yorker about, and the insurance crisis is not the crisis for insurance, it's the crisis for coverage, really, because the current situation is that insurers have pulled out, but this thing called FAIR, which is essentially like a flood re or a terrorism re type thing called Fair Access to Insurance Requirements Plan, is operated by private companies. It's a pool of risks, you know, typical pool of risks, and that has gone up enormously. I mean, that's increased 40% in terms of its value, and the value of the residential properties insured by FAIR is now an amazing $450 billion. Wow. $450 billion basically lives now in the state insurer. Triple what it was in 2020. So you've got a pretty worrying scenario now that if that falls over, because those risks are, you know, those claims happen, then that's a problem. But it's contained sort of within the California situation. Now, this is, you know, that's fair enough, but also there are similar schemes in other states now that they're getting together because there's similar problems, all related to these kind of climate related things, wildfires and so on. So it's just about working, but the edifice is creaking quite badly around insurance in the US at the moment. And of course, you know, it's the most insured, biggest insurance market in the planet, the US, but it's got this terrible climate risk issue going on, which you cannot avoid thinking it's, you know, going to get worse.
Yeah. And it's interesting, bring it back round to the kind of John Neal story. You touched on his remit at Aon being kind of climate, and it just seems to be more and more that climate it is going to drive the agenda in the next 5 to 10 years in terms of product development, but also the way that existing or traditional products, what coverage they're going to have. It's kind of questioning a lot of kind of what you'd never question over the last, since we've been in the market, I suppose.
Yes, and I think this is what this article says, is that the phrase here, all of which raises the question of what role insurance can and should play in a warming world. Again, I think, as you say, John Neal's role, if that's part of it or all of it, basically, is pivotal to any big insurance entity now. And indeed, the wider question of how much capital can you apply. I mean, one very interesting thing about California was that one of the problems the insurers had was that the Californian authorities had said you can't use modeling to set rate. You can only use historical losses, which is patently ridiculous, because clearly climate is driving more fires. There's more fires because, I mean, you can argue, as Trump has, that it's someone's fault, that they didn't do X or Y, but let's just say simplistically it is climate, and the change is happening regardless of what people do. Therefore, those risks are new risks or evolving risks, and you can't really argue with that when it comes to wildfires. To then say to insurers, I'm sorry, you can't model the potential scenario and price it in, means you can't run a business on that basis. There's no way you can run an insurance business on that basis, and that's indeed what has happened. So they pulled out, and now they've got a state-run insurer. But that doesn't change. It doesn't change the insurance situation. It just means the state insurer has got the risk and has to pay. It doesn't change the fact there's a fire.
Yeah.
So it's very uncertain now, and I think there'll be a lot of head scratching and working out as to where you go with this, because the rebuilding will take a long time. It was a surprise that this happened. It wasn't a place they expected it to happen. So even your modeling isn't working. So yes, it's interesting.
So I've got another question. As they rebuild, I mean, because so much of it has been devastated, they're almost like starting from square, blank sheet of paper. Do you think that the insurance industry will play a role in trying to rebuild those parts of the city to make them more resilient?
Yeah.
Or do you think that actually it's just going to be, we'll just rebuild it?
No, I think they will. I think you're right. I mean, there's been a few interesting kind of things I've noted. I mean, one was an interview with someone who was talking about you have to now build in climate risk into the rebuild and indeed the planning of cities. And some of that isn't just new technology or new innovation. Some of that is what he was saying, this chap, was that actually many buildings used to have kind of wooden roofs, funnily enough, which you think would be the worst thing. But what they did with those roofs was they soaked them with water. So when fires came, obviously the concrete structures or whatever, brick structures were fine. It's always the roofs that catch fire, of course. But if you've got the ability to douse them beforehand, that can create fire breaks and stop the fire going. So that thinking has already started, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of that. Both new thinking and new technology, I guess, and in building and so on. But fundamentally, it was also said that they're building in places that are hugely risky and pretty uninsurable.
Yeah, it's a tricky situation. That's for sure.
Well, then people move, right? But that's a whole other thing. They say, "Well, I'm not living there anymore."
Yeah, and that is that's a big problem.
Yeah,
not one we're going to cover in the next 10 minutes. No. So, news horn. So this, Ben, you sent to me.
Yeah.
Concerns over the Baltimore Bridge collapse. I was actually thinking about this only the other day, that I hadn't heard much
about
it. for a couple of months. What's
This is the kind of the weird world of insurance. We're just talking about, there's not enough insurance in somewhere, and then here there's way too much capital, so that the rates are dropping worldwide. This is partly why I put this article out there, not because of. So the Baltimore Bridge will be probably the largest marine loss ever. Costa Concordia, if you remember, that was the previous largest loss. This is about the same at the moment, but they're saying in this article they think it'll be bigger, to be honest. So 1.2 billion rising to whatever. So, but in the marine and energy classes, they're saying, Howden and others are saying, that's not even going to touch the sides because there's so much capital, such an abundance of capital and the competition, which we've talked about now with softening market rates, is meaning that there will be no problem at all, or there is now no problem in fulfilling these renewals on the reinsurance side. They are, way oversubscribed, most of these lines. And that's also what I'm hearing in the market. So you have got a fairly rapidly changing cycle now to a soft market because of the amount of capital. So even your most obvious biggest risks, which are costing huge amounts of money, are not going to impact the industry going forward. So yes, big change in the cycle, and actually really interesting comment that David Howden makes. He said, the number of new entrants who have been given ambitious growth targets or plans are competing for the same business as incumbents who are also looking to grow. Now, that's quite a long way of saying there is just massive competition and too many players going for the same business and a lot of capital. But that's causing pretty big drops, 10% down, they reckon, in this this kind of marine class of business, and some of the other classes, they're talking about 15% coming in. So that softening in some of these core P&C areas is big now. And competition from sort of stuff that we as Gracious look at, the competition now and how you're going to win and how you're going to grow is really a big question.
So I would say there's probably two interesting dynamics then that we could pick up on. If that competition, as you say, is happening and those rates are dropping, then there's two ways that you can operate in that market and still get a margin. Firstly, you look at your cost base and you go, right, how do we slim down, streamline, use the new technologies that are available to us to enable an operating model that can drive a profit at those levels? Or you say there's going to be consolidation with the bigger players taking up what they see as kind of strategic assets, or it just all plays out, and the ones that can't run the longest go to the wall, and that's it. So
the good questions. I mean, I think if you're talking about rate drops of 15%, and I know it's not an exact read across, but you're not going to save that much cost in the business. No way. I mean, that is, they've struggled to shave off 2% and 3% in London, so there's no way they're going to save that amount of money. That is a big drop in premium. The other thing I think that you've got to think about is just how much competition. They're going to be competing. They're going to be lower rates, and then they're going to get claims, right? And so those claims are going to hit them harder because their rates are lower. So that's going to hit the profitability of the businesses potentially. But there isn't a choice, I don't. And then the consolidation argument. Well, fine, but now the softer market, they're not attractive investments. They weren't that attractive before. When you look at P&C, they weren't getting much more than book value, as in terms of valuations. So growth is your only choice. You can't really slim down because of all sorts of reasons, but one main one being your investors are not going to allow you to not grow because that's what they bought in for.
Yeah.
So you've got a perfect storm really of not enough, the pie not getting bigger, capital rushing in, and too many players. So we're reaping, you're kind of reaping you reap what you sow. And what has happened, as we've said ourselves at Grace Church, that there was a big influx of incumbents who won a lot of business and grew very rapidly through 2019 to 2023. Now the squeeze has come. Your point is who's gonna survive and grow and who's not. I mean, it arguably favors the global players. They've got the deeper pockets. They can win share of business and wait it out longer.
Yeah.
Smaller players might struggle. Really might struggle because they will discount more quickly to win the business than the incumbents, arguably. I mean, I'm guessing. I don't know what will pan out, but definitely there'll be pressures on businesses. I mean, arguably there are strong in what we might call challenger businesses. I mean, the Fidelises. If you look at London, the Convexes are big. They're big, but new players, so they're big enough. Perhaps critical mass will matter. I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what happens with claims? I mean, so far, in a sense, so good. We just talked about the wildfires not hitting too hard, but if something does come along, and if the attritional losses that you get from secondary perils keep going up, yeah, you could find your business being quite significantly eroded over the next couple of years.
Yeah. Good. Right. Thanks for that, Ben. There we are. Punctuates the news there. So there's so much news that we had to be a bit picky, didn't we? But
yeah.
Anyway, we wanted to kind of close off by actually, Ben, I saw this before we move off news.
Oh yes, great story.
Yeah, WTW revised Willis and Towers Watson as trading names, and there's a great thread. It's well worth looking.
Yeah, I read it.
Mark's posted. Mark Gagan, Voice of Insurance, just talking about the brands, and obviously we talk a lot about. We have done over the past couple of years. It's been a bit of a focus for us, hasn't it? Branding, and it is funny that none of us have ever called it WTW. It's always called Willis, apart from informal settings. So yeah, it's interesting that they're going to go back to that, and it's so easy, as Mark points out, just to say Willis. Everyone within Willis has been calling it Willis, and yeah. Well, I mean, we have the same thing. So everybody calls us Tintech. They don't see the insurance network. They just Tintech, which is our biggest event. So, which is fine, but
yeah, it's about identity. I mean, it is branding, but it's identity. It's the naming of the thing. I think it's always problematic unless you put a lot of money. I think that WTW is difficult to say. It's a tongue twistery type of thing, which has something to do with it. Also, the amount of spend and effort that Plumeria and others put into Willis, that word Willis, and everybody walking around with the badges on, which being culturally wedded to the brand, I think is historically it was difficult to scrub away. Yeah. Plus WTW is is an acronym that you still think it's got Willis in there. It's there. You can still say Willis. It's not like prohibited. It's funny. It's funny because I'm thinking of, another business, PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, which tried to do it the other way around, which is they went to this enormously long kind of thing where they put all three, when they merged PricewaterhouseCoopers into this ridiculously long name, which was almost impossible for any design agency to put onto a poster or a board or a social media clip. It was the worst thing you could do to have something as long as that. And don't be under any illusion, a lot of this is decided on whether you can fit it onto Instagram or LinkedIn or all that sort of stuff. Design matters here. And they have, PricewaterhouseCoopers is still PricewaterhouseCoopers. Everybody calls it PwC, right? So it's funny how these things work. Sometimes that acronym can be useful and easy to use, like TIN, I guess. And sometimes you have something that is stuck, like Willis. Funny.
Yeah. So we'll see if that starts to creep back on people's badges.
Well, the slight problem as well was that Towers Watson was an actuarial business that got added on and did HR and but I don't think those have quite. They put it in the name, but they didn't quite merge it in terms of the operations and the working, cross-selling and things. So Marsh and Aon both have those sorts of operations, but they call them Aon Human Resources or Aon, consultancy or whatever. They do it different ways.
Good. Right. Let's talk.
But fundamentally, I don't care.
Yes.
That's what I was trying to say. Rambling. I don't really care if you call it Willis or WTW, and nobody else does really. It's like, just call it Willis. Stop mucking around with names and, make it simple. Like Allianz Commercial was good. Move.
Yeah. Good. Right. Let's talk about some of the stuff that we are doing over the course of this year. So the first thing is, see if this will share. Look at that. Studio. So we've been in the podcasting studio, haven't we?
Yeah, we have.
And don't know if this will work, but
we were.
But we had some guests in over the last day or so, and so we've done some kind of almost deep dive interviews with people around different areas. There's us there, and there's you, Ben, in the studio.
Oh, look at that!
That's
nice.
Relaxed. So
I look like I'm going to the electric chair or something there.
Yeah,
about to be electrocuted.
Yeah, you do a bit, don't you? Anyway, so we've done some deep dive podcasts looking at talent and skills, regulation, governance, and growth, and technology and innovation. So we've got those are going to be coming out over the next few weeks. We'll probably get them out.
It's a posh edition, isn't it? It's a posh edition of our weekly wrap up. It's like the premium edition, like business class or premium class version of our show. Yeah,
it's good. I've had a chance to have a listen back to it, and there is a marked improvement in the. You'll be surprised about this, Ben, about the production values.
Really, I'm really surprised at that.
Yeah, mind you, they have got better because I've got a new mixing desk. So
it's lovely, it's beautiful, smooth.
I can't stop pressing the buttons.
Yeah.
But anyway.
I like the new horn, by the way. I wasn't sure at the beginning, but now I think that's better than the bell.
Yeah.
It wakes you up on a Friday a bit.
Yeah, it does. Maybe that's it. It does have, it's got various things.
Not sure if listeners would agree, but I like it.
Horn. Let us know what you think. Bell or horn?
Drama. It's drama, horn. Horn gives you drama. Bell's just a bit, I don't know what that is.
Yeah. Okay. It was just a thing, wasn't it? So that's what we're going to be focusing on. The other focus, and this is what I wanted to talk to you about, Ben, because last night you ran your Claims Social, which is a really good, very informal, but very entertaining and informing panel sessions looking at London market claims. And it fits nicely because we've got a London market claims special interest group as well. So we're also getting some stuff. So there's going to be a big focus in 2025 on claims, its position in the market, how we can leverage the value more widely. And last night's debate discussion was how we can use claims in more of the sales upfront underwriting process, which is a topic that's been talked about for a long time at the conference, the London Market Claims Conference. And I think we're starting to see, and maybe COVID had something to do with this, with more claims teams coming to those meetings, but there's still tensions, aren't there, in the kind of
yes. I mean, I think it was, yeah. I think from the debate last night, it's clear that there is no consensus around how you do this or where even you start. I think there are some ideas, so I think it's going to be quite a long conversation, and change will be incremental. My feeling, but at least we're starting the conversation, and I mean you and I and leading the charge, aren't we? And I think that's important. It's there's some good ideas, I think, and things that we can take forward. I think notably people events like yours and mine are good because they do get people talking. And one of the things I took from last night were people saying we don't really have this sort of conversation very often together, with competitors talking about what we should be doing to promote this as a whole. And if you don't do that, I believe you won't move it forward. You'll just have fragmented things going on.
Indeed. And one of the other interesting topics of discussion last night was, I think, the talent talk. Let's call it that.
Yeah.
And kind of that, it was nicely put by one of the panelists that you have this kind of hourglass curve or whatever in the talent pipeline. So you have a lot of people coming in with low levels of experience, but you've got a lot of people at the top moving into kind of retirement, over 50s retirement bracket with lots of experience, but in the middle we seem to be lacking.
And that's what our statistics show, actually, is it's not just the young people, it's the middle, it's the squeeze of the more kind of mid-experienced people. So you have a succession issue then.
Yeah. So how do we fill that kind of vacuum in the middle? How do we bring those people through and educate them in a way that could perhaps accelerate traditional ways? And it was quite interesting that on the panel, quite a lot of people were still thinking about the learn by rote, learn by doing things, and I believe that has got to change, because it just won't keep up in a world that's changing so fast. You've got and let's not forget, we've already talked about competition and pressures on the cost base. Well, there's a load of finance directors out there that's looking at this technology going, we can leverage this and we can take it might only be 0.5% off, but that is 0.5% off. A big business is a lot of money. And so you're not going to have top talent coming in, spending a couple of years filling in spreadsheets and understanding numbers, because a computer can do that. And
there's no way. I agree. I mean, it's a bit like when the calculator came in, everybody said, oh, that's going to undermine the whole of society because nobody will be able to do maths anymore. But I'm certain that didn't happen. And actually, the calculator led to more use of the PC, the spreadsheet, and everything else that we know. And now we're just moving into a different phase. None of it ever changes the fact you need to know what the rough answer is going to be. And if it's not in that region that you expected, you better check it. In simple terms, I think you've got to also look at initiatives in the market, because I think the initiatives sometimes are not, for me, the right ones, and they need to be thought about. You could potentially easily solve the retirement problem if you offered incentives to stay on, experienced people to stay on for longer, working part-time or in a hybrid situation. And yet we've got quite a few leaders saying, oh no, everybody's got to be back in the office, we've got to have rules and regs. That will be the first thing that will turn off anybody in their 50s or early 60s going, I'm going to take early retirement. They might love the job, but if they're being forced to commute in every day, that's not going to work. And people live longer, right? I don't know if the insurance industry should have noticed this, given they do that very thing a lot of the time. People are living longer. They do enjoy their jobs. They don't want to work necessarily all the time, but you don't have to lose all of this experience necessarily. And that could give you the time you need, the breathing space to build that middle out again. So, John Muir, who we interviewed on his retirement, I think he retired well after the official age of retirement. And I suspect we'll probably see him back doing something somewhere soon, as we do with a lot of people. So it's not unusual. And he said, I think the industry will solve the problem if it's a problem. He said people will always want to come and work, and they'll do a great job and they'll learn. I think he's got a point. I think you can manage it to an extent by doing what people like the LMG are doing around programs. That's brilliant. I don't have any problem with that. But equally, you want to incentivize people to work. I mean, look at America. I mean, they had a problem with, kind of workers, and they incentivized, schemes in supermarkets and things for older people to go and work, a couple of days a week, and they solved that problem, filled the gap. You can do it. You can do it with money. You can do it with making people's lives interesting. With a bit of structure. Not everybody wants to completely stop and retire, including me, by the way.
Oh, really? Oh, good.
Well, no, I mean, I don't want it. I mean, I'm just, there's people at my age who take early retirement, obviously, and I think that some of those end up very bored. Not all of them, but a lot of them do, and they just end up then doing other things, So I don't think everybody just wants to go and play golf and sit on the beach.
No.
And in this day and age, you don't have to be in the office. You can do a lot of it. So all I'm saying really is there are fixes, I think, and there are things that if we had that kind of leadership in London, it could help. So maybe that's something for Lloyd to think about.
Yeah,
Mr. Roxburgh.
Yeah, new CEO and chairman.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is the sort of visionary, strategic thinking we want.
Yep, I'm sure they're listening. So there you go. Got your strategy worked out.
Yeah,
no problem, no charge.
Get on with it, guys.
Yeah,
there might be a charge.
Yeah. Well, just for the record, we're not ruling that out.
I've got to have something for my retirement, for God's sake.
We're not ruling that out. Okay, good. Right, on that complete clarity note, we shall wrap things up. Let's do this one more time. So, Ben, what are you doing this weekend? Anything good?
Not a lot, I don't think. I am buying a car. I think I mentioned I'm buying an EV car. So that's good. Another car. I'm buying another car, like you, buying lots of cars. So that's happening today or tomorrow. But I've just looked at the weather forecast here. It says dense fog all weekend. So I don't know what. I mean, it's like literally an icon with just very, very dense fog. So I don't know what's going to happen there.
Okay, we'll see.
So you?
I am losing at tennis on Sunday. So
cool.
It'll be another brilliant performance by our team. Hopefully, let's at least win a few points. That's let's keep the balls in the.
I might be losing at climbing if that's the thing. Like I'll be looking pathetic, falling off walls at some point as well.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Right. Thanks for tuning in. We will see you next week, and have a good weekend.
Have a good weekend. Bye.
Burgess and Bolton's weekly wrap-up.